and the female hormones. The female reproductive system is composed of your female external genitalia, female internal genitalia. The external genitalia is composed of your mons pubis, your labia majora and minora, your clitoris, vestibule of the vagina, vestibular glands, okay? Here is a review. This is your uterus. This is your urinary bladder in front. Behind that is your uterus. And the opening is the cervix. It opens the vagina, your vagina, the urethra, and the vaginal canal. This is your fallopian tube. This is your ovary. And this is your colon. Okay? This is your internal reproductive female. This is your cervix here, your vagina, upper vaginal canal, the uterus, the ovary, and the fallopian tube, okay? The opening of the fallopian tube. Okay. Functions of your ovaries. Oogenesis, maturation of the oocyte, ovulation, secretion of estrogen, progesterone, and inhibin. There is also inhibin, like the male reproductive, okay? But this time, only estrogen and progesterone. Like the male, the female also will undergo mitosis and meiosis in its journey to become an ovum. Now you remember when the sperm and the ovum meets, it will form a single stem cell. Okay. Now, in the female, it will follow the Mullerian duct, okay? So, in the fetal life of the female fetus, the oogonia will develop. There is mitosis and differentiation. So upon birth, the primary oocyte is already formed. And this has 46 chromosomes and 2 chromatids per chromosome. Then, during childhood, the first meiotic division, this will remain as primary oocyte until puberty, when the child becomes an adult and it will become reproductive, adult reproductive life. At puberty, your first polar body is produced. Unlike the male, the female develops only one oocyte, and the other one is a polar body. So lugi na tayo dyan. And then, during the secondary oocyte, the formation of the ovum from primary oocyte, secondary oocyte takes place. And second meiotic division is completed after fertilization. During the formation of the secondary oocyte, the second polar body is produced. So, isa lang talaga. It's only one. Not two. That's why the male, they have 400 million. While the female, we have millions, but when it reaches the adult, kasi polar bodies ang ma-produce instead of another oocyte. So, nalamangan na tayo sa male. Now, in the ovary, this is the one that takes place. The primordial follicle. Ano ba yan? This one, this is the one that will happen in the ovary. Primordial follicle will develop into an pre-antral follicle with one layer of your zona pellucida. Then an antrum develops, and this will become an antral follicle. And theca cells are formed. Then the ovum will go into pre-ovulatory mature follicle. The antrum will enlarge and granulosa cells will develop. And there is a layer of cell that surrounds the developing ovum. Upon ovulation, this is released outside, and this layer of cells is your corona radiata. Then a scar is left in the ovum, in the ovary. That is your corpus luteum. Later, the corpus luteum will regress and will degenerate. Okay? Now, this is what happens to, okay, yeah. This is your mature follicle, this one. The antrum is already very big, while there is a granulosa cell around the ovum. And so you have, the antrum is filled with fluid. there is a zona pellucida, the single layer of cells surrounding the ovum. Then the granulosa cells. Okay, and so your oocyte is inside. So this is already your mature follicle. Now your primary follicle. This is already the nucleus, and then this is already fully grown. It has granulosa cells. Preantral follicle, there is already theca cells formed. The theca cells is outside. Outside, okay? And then here is your early antral follicle. You have your zona pellucida around the ovum, the oocyte. Then you have the granulosa cells next to it, and then the theca cells outside. And the antrum is filled with fluid. Okay. That is what happens in the ovary and the development of the ovum. Now, the events that take place in the ovary. The cycle, since it is cyclic, the 28-day cycle, the normal is a 28-day cycle from day 1 to day 28. At the middle is your ovulation day. So day 14. This is the day that divides the cycle in the ovary into follicular phase and the luteal phase. Corpus luteum predominates after ovulation, while the developing follicle predominates during the follicular phase. Okay, so at first, multiple follicles develop. Then, all of a sudden, one follicle becomes dominant. Okay, this dominant follicle will mature until ovulation takes place. So once ovulation takes place, what happens? Corpus luteum is produced. The scar where the ovum comes from. So sort of a case, okay? After 25 days, your corpus luteum will degenerate. Now, if there is no fertilization that occurs at day 28, there is menstruation that takes place. And so the corpus luteum will degenerate and go back to basic 1, okay? So during the follicular phase, we call that estrogenic phase because it is the estrogen that predominates. Here is your menstruation, uterine bleeding, 1 to 5, usually day 1 to 5, but some they go as far as 7 days bleeding. Okay. Then in the luteal phase, we call that progestational phase because it is the corpus luteum that predominates, and then more of the progesterone is being produced during the luteal phase. That is in the ovary, okay? Now, in the uterus, so in the ovary, you have follicular and luteal phase. In the uterus is also being prepared in case fertilization takes place so that the ovum can easily be implanted on the endometrium of the uterus. In the uterus, 1 to 5, if there is no fertilization, is menstruation. Okay. Ano ba yan? So, after that is the proliferative phase, then the secretory phase. Proliferative phase, when the endometrial thickness will grow. Endometrium will grow in its thickness, will thicken, okay? And what is responsible for that? Your estrogen. Because the ovary will produce estrogens, okay, in its development. The theca and granulosa cells will produce estrogen. Then the ovum is released during ovulation at day 14. And it is being implanted in the endometrium of the uterus. This is already thickened. This is being prepared. At this time, progesterone predominates more than your estrogen. Your estrogen, since there is a breakage of the, during ovulation, there is a breakage, okay, of the developing of the follicle. So the amount of estrogen will decrease, but it will recover, but not as much as your progesterone. Okay. Your progesterone this time will predominate through your corpus luteum. Your corpus luteum is the one that will produce plenty of the hormones. Then when the corpus luteum will degenerate, the amount of the hormone will decrease also. So we call this stage after ovulation, the second 2 weeks, as menstruation, secretory phase of the uterus, uterine phase, okay? Secretory phase. And progesterone is predominant. it is the progesterone is responsible for the thickness and the nutrition of the ovum so that it can be implanted on the endometrium. If there is no fertilization, then menstruation will again take place because the corpus luteum will degenerate. Okay, and go back to day 1. Okay, you read on this. Tomorrow we will continue on the hormones. Okay, so you read on this so that ang dami pa natin i-discuss. See? Mabusisi kaya yan. Okay. So we'll stop here and then you read on this, the uterine phase and the ovarian phase, so that we will go easy tomorrow. Madali na lang i-explain and then you can easily pick up, especially if there is focus. ATM. Okay. Do you already have your grades? Hindi pa?
Wala pa po, Doc.
Sige, I will follow it up.
Thank you po.
Okay. Sigurado this week. Sige. That would be all for today.